Alrighty, so we live. We live. We are live. We are live. Alrighty, welcome everybody. Welcome. We are getting into this lesson as promised. I'm not even sure what's today's date, but anyway, I think today is December 27th, if I'm not mistaken, 2025, and we are gonna get into a lesson. We're gonna discuss from Indians to Negroes to enslaved, and we are gonna go into some detailed information. I'm gonna stick to the subject matter because I'm gonna take this live and I'm gonna repost it on my YouTube. Okay, and my YouTube, the name of my YouTube is Original American Sun, as in SUN. Original American Sun, as in SUN. So that's where the live will be. Is going to be posted. Once it's done, I'll make a post and let everybody know, hey, it's on YouTube. So I'm not gonna give too much fluff in here. I'm not gonna get distracted. I'm gonna once again stick to the lesson and with the information so that you could do your own due diligence, do your own research. Okay. So do me a favor, please tap the live, repost the live. Let's get as many people in here, in here as possible, so we could share enough information that our people start waking up to what truly transpired in or on our ancestral land. All right. Now, I'd already done a lesson talking about, pardon me, talking about creating reasonable doubt about colonial narratives in the Americas. However, I didn't repost any of that. I didn't do any of that. So guess what? For those of you who missed that live, I'm gonna go over that, just that one particular lesson. I'm gonna add it to this lesson that I'm actually talking about right now, because it all adds up. It's all coherent. Okay, so we're gonna do some reading. And what I'm reading from is not from any book. It's a lesson that I created, but I'm also giving references where you could find that information. So you can't find that in a book. However, what I could probably do is, and it's no promise, sometime soon or eventually I'll post it on myniji.com, so you guys will be able to get the PDF of the lessons. Okay, because it's imperative that we share that information. All right, let's rock. And keep tapping the screen. Let's get this algorithm going, get as many people on here as possible, and repost and share the live. Let me drink a little bit of my cilantro water. Big up yourself, love, mister. Why go on? All right, cool. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Chief Flying Eagle, aka Lord Amaticon, aka the Black Identity Slayer. And I was sent here to restore my people. When I say sent here, I'm talking about I manifested here on earth, to restore my people. It took me a few years, to find my true purpose. You know what I'm saying? But I've found a few callings, but I've now stepped into my purpose, and that is to restore my people, the original people of the Americas. All right, so let's rock. Let's start reading. Creating reasonable doubt about colonial origin narratives. Downloadable lesson document. All right. Like I said, I'll make sure at some point I'll make sure these PDFs are actually available on my website, myniji.com. That's my personal website. Okay. All right, cool. The purpose of this lesson. The goal is to create reasonable doubt about colonial ideology systems that shaped identity and origin stories, especially the way brown-skinned people in the Americas were labeled, relabeled, and assigned external origins. This is not a request for blind belief in any single story. It is a method, the use of logic, pattern, recognition, documentation, standards, and colonial motive to test whether the official narrative is complete, fair, and consistent. All right. Once again, don't forget to repost the live and share the live. The key theme: colonialism functions through inversion and replacement. I'm going to repeat that. The colonial system, it functions through inversion and replacement. So therefore, the goal of the colonizers, literally, they came to kill, steal, and destroy. All right, which is pretty much the MO of what's called the adversary, which is Satan. All right, all Satan means is adversary. It's not a scoop. It's not one of those big spooky dudes with a red outfit and a horn and a pitchfork. No, that's not true. Anybody could be the adversary. All right, so the people who came here in 1492, they were the adversary to the indigenous people that were actually on the land. So their goal, okay, they function through inversion and replacement. It make the old appear new and make the new appear old. That's why when they came into the Americas, they deemed the Americas, pardon me, as the new world, because everything had to be made new. However, I did a lesson on show and prove from the most respected archaeologists and scientists in the world to show and verify that America is the oldest landmass on Earth in terms of the cratons. Okay, to be quite to be specific, about 330 million years older than Africa, which was the second oldest. All right, and that's facts. That's well documented. The inversion is reinforced through naming, law, and schooling. All right, that inversion is reinforced through naming, law, and schooling. So through their changing of the names, whether it be the locations or the people, that's part of the colonial system. Through their laws are not laws. They're actually codes, statutes, and ordinances. Okay? So let's put that into perspective once more. Okay? Their laws, the laws of the foreign occupiers, as in the United States, for example, they don't have laws. They have statutes, codes, and ordinances, and those are not laws. They are exactly what they are. So their inversion is reinforced through their codes, their statutes, their ordinances, and renaming of the people and the lands, and also through their what's called the educational system. And that is a fact. Number one, define your terms, or the term whenever people start talking to you about their theories and they don't have any substantial facts to back it up, researchable documentation, then they're just theories. People just get into information and they start spewing things on the internet. But this is what I want you to do. You have to define their terms. When we say Negro, Black, African, or Native, right? State whether you mean a modern identity, a legal status, a colonial label, or a physical description. Most times people don't question these narratives. They just go along with it, and these people, they react with emotions. I don't do that. I respond with documentation. Reason being, I did network marketing for a very long time. And in network marketing, we were taught that your documentation will beat conversation every time. People could talk and talk and talk, but if you come with the documentation, it outweighs the conversation that people come with. And that's what I like to do. I love bringing documentation. Okay? Number two, you must separate enslavement from origin. Because someone or people are enslaved, it doesn't mean that they originated from a region outside of that place that they were enslaved. I'm going to repeat that. Okay? You have to separate the enslavement from its origin. What do I mean by this? Anyone can be enslaved in their own land. It does not denote that the enslavement is tied to another form of origin. And that's what transpired in the Americas. Our people were enslaved, hence, they were taught that the enslavement, it actually meant that they came from another point of origin. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. Okay? So you have to question those things. And that's why I tell people you have to use discernment, use wisdom. And when you study enough to show yourself approved. Number 3, and I'm not, for those of you who are just tuning in, I'm not reading from a book. That's a lesson that I put together. Eventually, I'll make sure that the lesson is actually put on myniche.com under, it's going to be titled From Indian to Negro to Enslaved. And that whole section will have all those documents that I'm going through today, because I want you to have enough information to teach your own people. You know, teach it on your own TikTok, teach it on your YouTube, your Facebook. Just show the brother some love, man. That's all. It's my intellectual property. Just show some love. You know what I mean? That's all. All right. Number 4, reasonable doubt is a discipline. Most people don't have discipline. Now, what are your discipline and what is your discipline? Your discipline, when you look at the word discipline, you see it looks like the word disciple. So from a metaphysical, spiritual perspective, your discipline is your disciples. All right. And if you're not in control of your disciples, then you don't have discipline. I'm going to repeat that. If you're not in control of your disciples or you can't teach them, then you are not disciplined. So therefore, reasonable doubt is discipline. You have to be able to grow and teach your disciples in order to have, once again, reasonable doubt. It does not require claiming you already know the full truth. That's not what it means. It requires identifying the contradictions, the double standards, and the motives. Because every colonial story, it has a contradiction. It has a double standard, and by default, there is a motive. So you have to ask yourself, what are the contradictions? Can I identify the contradictions? For example, when they first came into the Americas, they called the people Negros de Terra. That means the Negroes of the land. It means the blacks of the land. What's the contradiction? Or what's the double standard? The double standard is you are calling this so-called Native Americans indigenous people, but the original people, you're telling them they're from Africa. And you have set up a system that creates the double standard. We are being treated as foreigners in our own land. So that's the double standard. What is the motive? It's very simple. We have been colonized. So therefore, the contradiction drives the motives, or the motives drives the contradiction. Either way, they're interchangeable. All right? Section 1. The colonial mind, discover and replace. That is the mind of a colonizer. To discover and replace. If we take it back to a biblical perspective, that was what the Lord God was doing. Go into this land, discover it. In fact, we are even going to send spies. All right? And once we have done that, what are we going to do? We're going to take the land and we're going to replace the people. It's the same narrative. And that's why I tell people, most people truly don't know what the Bible is or what it means. The story was literally a historical book to tell you exactly what happened to indigenous people around the world, particularly in the Americas where it ended, because the goal was to get to the promised land. And that is the promised land, Canaan, Canada. So that was the ultimate goal, and it was accomplished because it was part of the prophecy. Okay? So the colonial mind, discover and replace. The colonial system presents itself as a discovery, but most people don't know what the true etymology of discovery means. When you go look up the etymology of the word discovery, it means to reveal, to make known. So therefore, a discovery is not necessarily something that never existed. All it means is that it was revealed to those who were not aware of that discovery. So that's what it means. Go look up the etymology. All right. For the sake of time, and I want to stay focused, we're not going to look into the etymology of discovery, but maybe we will, later down in the lesson. But discovery is a narrative. It's a trick. You cannot discover what already exists without first weakening the legitimacy of what you found. That's why when they came into the Americas, they had to call it the New World. That's part of weakening. You feel what I'm saying? The legitimacy of what they found. When they changed the identity of the people, that's another form of weakening the identity of the people. You feel me? So all that, those are literally schemes and tricks of the colonial system. Discover and replace. The core claim, the purpose of colonization is not only to occupy the land, it is to replace the meaning of the land, replace who counts as original people, and replace how history is remembered. If you have a colonial system and the education is strictly taught from that system, they are not going to teach you the truth, because remember, they came with a purpose. What's the purpose? To discover and replace. So why would you think that this educational system that was put in place by the colonial system, the people who came to kill, steal, and destroy, they're going to tell you the truth? Why would they tell you the truth? Anybody with a little ounce of common sense would question everything that they were taught. So once again, the purpose of colonization is not to occupy only, not just to occupy the land. It is to replace the meaning of the land, replace who counts as original people, and replace how history remembers or remembered. Colonial replacement usually requires 5 motives. Let's go into those motives right now. Colonial replacement usually requires 5 motives or 5 moves. They are always strategic. That's why they came with a plan. They worked their plan, and that plan, it did work. Hence, we are in the situation we're in today. Number 1, rename the land so the colonizers become the starting point of history. That's why we have to make America the new world. Therefore, when we give the history of that particular landmass called America from the perspective of a new world, all right, that is the starting point of the people's history. I'm not sure if this is actually sinking in. I'm not sure if it's sinking in, but I'm going to repeat it again. The colonial replacement usually requires 5 strategic moves. Number 1, rename the land so the colonizers become the first starting point of history. So therefore, our history in the Americas, it starts at 1492. And that's why it's very difficult for so many people who are actually original people of the land, for them to fathom, you feel me, their roots in the Americas. Because that's not what the colonizers taught them. That's not what his story taught them. So therefore, they gave our people a new beginning. It didn't just happen in the United States. It started in the Caribbean. The Caribbean was the testing ground. The Caribbean was the blueprint. And by the time they got into the United States, the system was perfected. So they became experts at doing that by the time they got to the United States, amidst of all the wars that took place. All right. Next, reclassify the people so that their original identity becomes unclear or contested. And that's what we're dealing with right now. Our original identity, literally, we were reclassified. And therefore, it becomes unclear to our people. Cognitive dissonance. They have fallen into a state of coma, into a state of forgetfulness. If you tell people something, literally, over and over and over again, it becomes a program. Why do you think they have school programs? The schooling is part of the program. And the same information is redundant. if you tell a chicken, you know, it's a pigeon, eventually it's going to maybe try to sound like a pigeon at some point. Because in its mind, it convinced that it's a pigeon. It's the same thing that happened to our people. So therefore, they are actually unclear of whom they are. A lot of them are still confused. Even the ones who claim that they are indigenous, they call themselves black. So I know they're still confused. They still talk about black American, black indigenous. There's no such thing. That don't exist. You feel me? It doesn't exist. And then therefore they start contesting things within them, their own selves. They start questioning themselves. Now I know my grandma told me I'm Indian, but the outside stimuli is telling me something else. So therefore I'm contesting my inner truth with the outside noise. So they are still conflicted within their own person. So they're not sure what they're dealing with. And hence it creates cognitive dissonance. Next, control the legal definitions that decide who has rights and who does not. When they change your identity, you feel me? That takes away your right and puts you in a position to beg for privileges. Anyone who's enslaved, anyone who's a subject of another authority, you have no rights. We cannot call privileges rights. You feel me? You have a right to travel, but the privilege is you need a driver's license. You see the difference? Now, this is not what the subject is about, but I'm just giving you an example. Okay? You have a right to grow food in your yard, but the privilege is you need a license for that. But that's your God-given right. So why do you need a license for that? You have a right to get free water from Mother Earth, but that right was taken from us, and you were given the privilege to buy water in the store. So you see the difference between a right and a privilege. A right is given to you by the universe, the gods, the ancestors, whatever you want to call that term. That's not visible. It's really up to you. But it boils down to those are inherent rights. You feel me? Oh yeah, they always messing with the numbers. They always do. But because you see, they know I'm not one of the ones that come on here to do things for likes and to get paid. I do it because I want to restore my people and show my people what needs to be done so we could come together as the collective and rise. So TikTok will always do that. YouTube been doing that for years now, since 2011. So I'm not surprised. It is what it is. The bottom line is those who are here will get the message. That's all that matters. And then I'll record it and hopefully I'll be able to retrieve the recording and I'll post it on YouTube. All right. But thanks for letting me know. So next, number 4, control the educational system so the new definitions feel natural to future generations. Let's read that again. That's key. That's very important. Control the educational system so the new definitions feel natural to the future generation. I mean, I see all the young ones on TikTok, on Facebook, on YouTube, they fall into the narrative of falling into the trap of, I wouldn't say it's a trap, but pretty much the movement of delineating from Africans, but at the same time, they call themselves black. Don't realize in law, once you call yourself black, it means 2 things. You have no rights, you are dead in law, and also it also means, according to the census, the United States Census, I'm not the one making this up. They are telling you what it means. Black means it means that you belong to a designated racial group in Africa that's not tied to any original people or original land. So this is one of the tricks of the colonizers. Control the education so that the definition feels natural to future generations. And you cannot tell our people that they're not black. They want to curse you out. They want to curse you out because they'll tell you now, well, you're not one of us. Well, if me being black makes me one of you, then I don't want to be one of you because I'm not black and I will never accept that. Never will I accept that because I'm not going to disrespect my ancestors by doing that. It's disrespectful to them. And I have to remain in honor regardless of the course. All right, let's proceed. Finally, they have to normalize the new story until questioning the story sounds unreasonable or crazy. That's why you have so many people here. Even if, for example, I gave you an example before, but for the purpose of this lesson, I'll go over that story again. I happened to be browsing live on TikTok, and I spent about 2 minutes, and there was a gentleman that came on the live, okay? And he literally, in fact, I stayed for about 2 minutes and they invited me up as a guest. I came up and I spoke, the truth, information that could be, that could be verified. But he came up and he said that, well, I have my genealogy. And just so you know, all black people in the Americas, especially the United States, they're Africans. Because he said I could prove it with my genealogy. So they put him on the big screen, okay? In fact, he was featured on TikTok, on that live. And then he pulled up his genealogy. And first things first, we noticed is that he changed his name to an African name. And there's nothing wrong with that. You have a right to self-identify. You have a right to change your name. But here's the irony in all of this. He went to his great-grandfather. So he went through his mother, his father, his mother's mother, his mother's father, his father's mother, etc., until he got to his great-grandfather on one of his parents' side. And it took him, I think, somewhere about the late 1700s, early 1800s. And with that being said, when it got into his great-grandfather or his grandfather, either one, right? It ended with the ancestry saying plantation, it says slave plantation. So basically it says plantation slave. And he took that to mean that all his people are Africans. So this is what I'm saying. The colonial system normalizes the story until questioning the story, it sounds unreasonable or crazy. What this gentleman don't know or he wasn't aware of. And he wanted to argue and I don't like debating, but he wanted to debate with me and talk about, well, take a DNA test. I'm like, bro, DNA test cannot tell you where you're from. You feel me? Your genealogy can. And nowhere in your genealogy it said that your people were from Africa. And even him, in his own words, he said that it showed that all my people are from down south. All of them was born down south. But it started with my great-grandfather, and it says plantation slave. When he don't even know that when you look at the etymology of the word plantation, plantation means estate. Plantation means growing seeds. So therefore, our people were growing seeds. They owned the estates that they had. And they became enslaved on their own land. Or even working on their own land as sharecroppers. He just assumed it meant that they came from Africa. Even today in 2025, when people go to work, what do they say? Man, I'm going to go to that plantation, man. Why do people still say the same thing? There's nothing new under the sun. Are you actually on a slave plantation? Physically chattel slavery? No. But that's what he took it to mean. Disrespecting his ancestors and just literally generalizing and say now everybody in the United States, they black and they African. Because his father's, his great-grandfather, it ended with his genealogy saying plantation slave. And there goes the ignorance, and that's the educational system. You feel me? And that's why I like to come put things in perspective and make sure people know what's going on. All right, let's go into section 2. What the colonizers have to do is this. New everything. Everything have to be new. The naming as an ideological control. Naming as an ideological control. I'm going to give you another example. Your mother had a living baby. They showed proof of that with a certificate of live birth. Then they had to do a copy. That was a renaming. That was a new identity that became a birth certificate. And all of a sudden, that's a whole new person that got created. And you think it's you. It's the same thing that they do because they did that to control. They cannot control the man or the woman, but they could control the beast or the creature that they created via the man and the woman from the certificate of live birth. But that's a whole different lesson. We won't get into that. I'm just giving you an example of renaming and naming, and the ideology of that concept becomes a tool or a form of control. All right? The Americas were labeled the New World. The regions became the New England, New York, New Jersey, New Spain, New France, and so on. Calling something new is not natural at all. It is a declaration that the colonizers, they use from the very beginning of their reality on our land. I'm going to repeat that. The Americas were labeled the New World. Regions became New England, New York, New Jersey, New Spain, New France, or sometimes just call them the names that they already had in Europe. Okay? So that's what it is. Calling something new is not neutral. It is a declaration that the colonizer is using from the beginning of his reality on our land. To the people already living there, the land was not new. To our ancestors, it wasn't new. It was just life. They were just living life. In fact, we didn't even call the land anything. I mean, people talk, well, the original name is Turtle Island. The original name is America. Man, we didn't call it anything. Well, Chief, how do you know? Go ask a tiger, what is the name of the land? Go ask a lion, what do you call the land? Go ask a bear, what do you call the land? Go ask a hawk, what do you call they're going to look at you like you're crazy if they look at you at all. The bottom line is, it was because of colonization. Foreign people came into the land, now naming the land. That is what took place. No landmass had a name until they started calling it those names. The people just lived on the land, especially the indigenous people. Okay? So once again, to the people who lived on that land, the land was not new. It was ancient and established. But by calling it new, the colonizer, recenters history around their arrival. And that's what took place in the Americas. They renamed our landmass, and therefore the entire narrative of what the Americas were and are, it changed. And now it recenters on the whole concept or ideology of the colonizers. That is why when you go into the Noah Webster's 18 dictionary, it gives you a clear, definitive meaning of what American is. Okay? The original native of the land. The copper-colored people that were found in America by the Europeans. But, a conjunction, but is now being applied to the Europeans born in America. It's exactly what happened right here. The colonizers recenters history around their arrival. So now they get to be Americans, and we get to be Black Americans, Afro-Americans, Caribbean American, et cetera, et cetera. And our people don't realize the trick. That was played on our people. And we out here fighting each other. You feel me? Let us proceed. Creating reasonable doubt. Here's a question. If the story is that the land was discovered and new, why must the old reality be pushed into the background? What was renamed? And why does the educational system, not center what existed before the new label? Because they will not do that. That's not what the colonial system does. They are not building on the old to create a narrative of the new and the old in one. They have literally abandoned or dismissed the old and took up a new narrative, even putting Native Americans in our place. That's new. Native Americans are not from the old world. Native Americans is a new concept that was created literally in the 1700s via Alaska from Russia. They did not come from the Bering Strait, as the story was told through the educational system about 12, 30, 15,000 years ago. That's a damn lie. That never happened. But you see, that is what was taught. Because I've given many instances where I have debunked that with, once again, validated information. So we don't have to get into that right now. That's not what this lesson is about. All right? Section 3, identity, instability. Why one group gets renamed over and over? That's the question I'm asking. Why does one group gets renamed over and over? One of your strongest, when people are literally trying to come at you, one of your strongest reasonable doubt arguments is the identity of instability and the pattern. All right, the pattern in which they're doing it. And it happens across the Americas. Brown-skinned people were repeatedly labeled and relabeled. Why is that? Particularly in the United States. To Negro, colored, black, Afro, African, African American, minority, person of color, and I could go on and on and on, or just strictly colored. And let's not forget the N word, right? See how long we've been on this live. People are sharing the live, but we're still stuck at 15 people. You tell me. But it's okay though. It's all right. I appreciate love each and every one of you that are here. Obviously, something in the universe is trying to prevent this message from going out, but it's okay. We'll get it out to the people. And I just want this adversary on TikTok. You have no control over this message. No control whatsoever. All right? So release this message. Let it get out to the people. And I'm not asking. I'm telling you. All right? Let's go. All right, cool. Let's rock. Meanwhile, many other groups generally maintain stability in their identity and labels even when they migrate. Okay? Oh, yeah, I know you guys are liking, so much gratitude. As soon as I said that, it jumped up to 19. Like I said, man, it's, once you tell yourself these people have no power over you, that's it. We are the ones who limit ourselves. I just spoke about it and said, nah, TikTok, you got to release this. Let it go. All right? Let the message get out to the people. Let's read that again. All right? Meanwhile, many other groups generally maintain their stable identity and labels even when they migrate. The Irish remains the Irish, often Irish American. The Italians remain Italian. The Nigerians remain Nigerians. Indigenous people are often given broad labels, but the system still recognizes the Native Americans as a category of the land, or the new category of the land. Reasonable doubt question. Why is it that one group's identity, like I said before, has changed 6 to 8 times, while others keep the continuity of the name and their origin? What power does constant renaming serve? There is a reason why our people are constantly being renamed, because every name takes us further from our roots and closer to a made-up root. I'm going to repeat that because that might go over some heads. The constant renaming or reclassification of our identity, it takes us farther away from our roots, but at the same time, it draws us closer to a falsified root, which is Africa. And by no means I'm here to put down Africa. I'm not one of those. I don't do that. I don't have to put people down to be who I am. And I detest people who do that. I actually denounce them. You don't have to disrespect people. You don't have to put people down. You don't have to degrade people. You don't have to do that. Even if they do it, you don't have to reciprocate. You don't have to do that because we are who we are. Them talking is not going to change that. So I say focus on what needs to be done. And what needs to be done is minding our business, coming together and dealing with the bigger problem, which is what? The occupying force on our land that has enslaved us and continue to enslave us. That is my mission. That is my goal. It is not to put down Native Americans. It is not to put down Africans. It is not to put down anybody, but just speak the truth. It's really that simple. So therefore, why is that one group's identity, it changes or it is being altered 6 to 8 times while others keep the continuity of their name and origin? Whether you know this or not, every individual who actually has an origin in Africa, Asia, or Europe, there are literally unbroken records to prove and verify their point of origin. You know who have them? The Mormon Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints. They have every single record of every individual that came here since 1492. When it comes to us, they want you to think that it ends in the 16 and the 1700s to what does it do? To correlate the narrative that we came from Africa on slave ships, but yet still they could go all the way into Europe past 1492. Let it make sense. And I have verified that. I have documentation to verify that. And they created this ancestry system to control the narrative, the DNA system to control the narrative. If we make them think that they're African by taking a DNA and they only have 1% Native American, which we are not Native American, by the way, then of course, what you going to think? What are you going to think? It is all part of the colonial system, my people. Exactly. His story, BS. Okay. It is part of the colonial system. All right. Let's proceed. A disciplined way to teach this to connect. All right. The label shift to outcomes. When the label changes, this is what you have to ask. When the label changed, what rights changed? People don't realize this is about rights and sovereignty. If I change your identity, I take away your sovereignty and I take away your inalienable rights that came from your creator and your ancestors and the rights that you already had on your land. So that is the purpose of me changing your identity. You feel me? I put you in a jurisdiction that's foreign to you. Why is it foreign? Because I am a foreign occupier. And now I am in control. So therefore, you don't have any rights no more. However, I'm going to create a system that will give you privileges if I so choose. And if you violate anything, then you get to go to jail. You get to pay a fine because now I control you on your land. The land that I made mine. I hope this is registering with a lot of the people that are listening right now. So therefore, once you have changed the identity of our people by changing our identity and giving us a new label, my question is, what rights changed? Next question, what land connection was weakened? Well, you may ask, well, Chief, what do you mean? What land connection was weakened? Before the colonizers came, we didn't need passports. We didn't need permission to go through our ports. So therefore, the connection between indigenous people of the Americas, their relationship and that connection was weakened via the colonial system. Because we need permission to go and back and forth into our ancestral land. We didn't need that permission. We were able to go to Jamaica, Haiti, all these different places and connect with each other and bring things back into the mainland to heal our people, because anything could grow in the Caribbean, anything. And our people knew that. But we can't even do that no more, because all the trade that's being taken place is done by the Arabs and the Chinese and some Caucasians. We have to ask for permission to go to Jamaica to get some soursop. We have to buy those things. We have to get permission to get coconuts from Brazil, Costa Rica, when we were doing those things naturally. So therefore, it weakened the connection that we had as a people, as the collective. But yet still, y'all still want to be individuals. Y'all want to keep fighting each other. Let us continue. We are being taxed for everything that is natural and was natural in our own ancestral land. And people don't see a problem with that. They're chasing reparations. Next, what new origin story was attached? Well, that is a given. The new origin story is that you came from Africa as a slave. And the story that they gave us, once again, to justify the paper genocide, these people were taken against their own will. And they were put in the bottom of a ship without any type of documentation. So therefore, we cannot trace what part of Africa they're from. That is what they want us to believe. But in the word believe is the word lie. It's a belief system. And they cannot show any type of proof that this actually took place. It is the work of the colonizer. They were the ones who created the narrative. The same way you cannot tell people Santa Claus ain't real or the Easter Bunny don't lay eggs. They will fight you for that. What you trying to tell me? Christmas is pagan and it was connected to sanitalia. What are you talking about? Are you crazy? No, that was the birth of Christ. You cannot convince people that it's not. So people that have that level of understanding, you just have to leave them alone and reach for the low-hanging fruit for people who are seeking the truth. Not for those who are too far gone with the indoctrination. I'm not saying that we are to forget them. That's not what I'm saying. But it takes too much energy to revive people who are already dead. Let us reach out to those that still have on the oxygen mask and they want to live. They don't want to be the walking dead. They don't want to be black. They don't want to be black. We cannot fight people to be who they don't want to be or who they are. You feel me? Then you become the enemy. You did. All right? So let's proceed. So like I said before, what new limitation or stigma next? What new limitation or stigma came from the label? All right? Because they gave us the attachment that of a point of origin that we came from Africa, which is not true. That's a lie. Okay? I promise you, we have more people in the Americas during the so-called colonial period from Europe than we have from Africa. And that's a fact. Guaranteed fact. Okay? And like I said, I have nothing against Africa. This is not what this is about. Africa is the main point of subject is because that's where they took our American roots and they placed it in Africa. If they had done that in Asia, I would have been talking about Asia. If they had done that in Europe, I would have been talking about Europe. So this is not any hate or spite to Africans. I hear people come on the internet and disrespect Africans, curse them out. Africans do the same thing. That's not my thing. At some point, and like I said, my goal and my purpose is to restore my people, my original indigenous American people as a collective. Once we have done that and we put ourselves in a position, my goal is so that we're able to trade with our brothers and sisters or cousins, whatever you want to call these people in Africa. I want us to trade with them. Because guess what? The colonizers on our land, they're doing it. We're not benefiting anything from it. So why do we have to hit them? Why do we have to put them down? Why do we have to fight them? I hear people talking about criticizing Africans for eating with their hands. That is the way you're supposed to eat, you dumb. You're not supposed to eat with utensils, especially metal utensils. That is not natural. When you eat with your hands, you are more connected to your food. And it creates more electricity. But y'all on the internet dogging Africans for eating with their hands. You're disrespecting Africans because they crush their food to eat. That's what you're supposed to do. Because when you eat your food in whole, it put too much work on your liver. But once again, ignorance. Why do you think the so-called Bible tell you go back to being a child? Not childish, but go back to being a child. Do they give children, grown people food? No. They give them crushed foods. Why? Because their liver is not supposed to process whole foods like that. So when you eat with your hand, you're actually grounding your food. But idiots on the internet criticizing Africans for that when that's actually part of also an American ancestral culture. Like I said, mental disease, man. Mental disease. Stop the hate. Because everything you're putting out there, guess what? It's going to come back to you. I promise you that. So I don't condone that. And our republic does not support that. We are not here to teach hate. It doesn't mean we have to sing Kumbaya with everybody. That's not what it means. But we don't have to hate people and put people down and belittle people to be who we are. We don't have to do that. You feel me? So stop disrespecting indigenous culture. We did that in the Americas. That's what we were supposed to do. Crush your food. Eat it with your hands. Let me ask you a question. Right here in Genesis chapter 1, what did it say? That the God of the Bible gave us fruits with seeds to eat as meat. Let me see you go eat your fruits with a fork and a knife. Aren't you supposed to eat it with your hands straight from the tree? Do you go to the tree and use a fork and a knife to pick your fruits? You're supposed to use your hand straight from the tree to the mouth. That is what's natural. Like I said, man, y'all people are just so evil, disrespectful, and I promise you the universe is going to deal with y'all. I promise you that. Watch and see. And I can't wait to see it. Because y'all are just filled with too much hate, man. I don't like that. It's just hatred, and I don't like it. I detest people who hate people. All right? I'm not saying that you are supposed to love people's evil actions, but don't hate people. That's all I'm just saying. All right? Let's proceed. Section 4. Black as a political identity, not a literal color. Let's repeat that. Black is a political identity. It is not a literal color. Obviously. Okay? Obviously. This is not black. I don't know why brown-skinned people, they just insist on calling themselves black. When the colonizers told you, when they came into the Americas, they saw brown-skinned people, copper-toned people, chestnut people. They told you that. Literally, every colonizer who came in their historical annals, they told you that the people were brown. But they convinced you that you are black in your mind. And you just can't seem to get away from calling yourself black when this is a black object. Hold on for a second. Okay? This is a black object. Look at my skin. Let it make sense. Let it make sense. Let it make sense, people. Let it make sense. So don't you see it was done intentionally? That it's not literal? So therefore, in my mind, it should beg the question, if my skin is brown, then why am I calling myself black? Exactly what does that mean? That alone in itself should give me some type of motivation, some type of determination to find out what the hell is going on. But people don't use discernment. They go along to get along. You feel me? Because they promised the color that you are going to get a reward for being a color. So you are chasing the reward. Not that you believe you are the color. You are chasing the reward that the color identity is promised. And not even realizing that's an illusion. It's an illusion. Let me give you another example. Thank you for the love. If someone is actually a master, is on a horse and carriage, and the horse is literally the slave, this is what the master does. The horse knows it's tired. The horse knows it's been running for so many years, non-stop. But the master, he takes a whole carrot, he ties it to a string, and then he takes a long piece of stick, and then he puts it in front of the horse's face. So while the horse is running, that carrot stays in the same position. So the horse keeps running towards the carrot, but the horse never catches up with the carrot. It's the same thing is happening to our people that call themselves black. The black identity is the carrot. Oh yeah, keep running, keep running. You're going to keep running, but you will never catch up to what was promised, which is the carrot to that black identity. It's an illusion, and y'all just don't see it. And I know a lot of you are not going to like me for speaking the truth, but I don't give a damn. Because like I said before, I am the black identity slayer, and I'm going to continue to speak the truth. You feel me? So it's the same situation. You dig? Black was imposed as a political category on brown-skinned people, not as a literal description of their skin color. In practice, black functions as a colonial status label only. Skin tone is physical. Status is a legal and political term. Let me say that again. Skin tone is physical. Status is legal and a political term. A system can label people in ways that serve control regardless of their true origin. Once a label becomes law, it can be treated as if it describes biology or ancestry, even when it does not. Let's repeat that again, because like I said, I don't want that to go over anybody's heads. Let me read that again. And for those of you that's just tuning in, I'm not reading from a book. This is a lesson that I put together. Okay? So just so you know, this is a lesson I put together, so you won't find that in a book. But I am giving reference, you feel me, where you could find, bits and pieces of that to put it together yourself if you have to. All right? But I'm going to eventually put the lesson on my website, myniji.com. So therefore you could use it. You have my permission to use it. Don't sell it to people. Don't charge people to teach it. You know what I mean? Just teach. And all I'm just saying is just give your brother a little shout out. Right? That's all. All right? So the system can label people in ways that serve control regardless of their true origin. Once a label becomes law, okay, because black and white, their statuses and they're actually in law. So therefore it becomes the law of the United States. Then it is now treated and describes, you feel me? So therefore it can be treated as if it describes your biology or your ancestry, even when it does not. Somebody say, how does Black's law define the word black? Honestly, I'm not sure. I don't think Black's law have the word black in it. Because I think I've checked, but I don't think there's no official meaning of black in Black's law dictionary. You could verify that, but I haven't come across it. You know what I mean? So, and I'm certainly sure I probably, searched it before, since I've already looked at the etymology of the word black. I would think that, I would also have looked at the Black's Law Dictionary, but it's not in here, based on my own findings. Okay? Next. Reasonable doubt question. If black became a political identity tied to disposition, this is what the black identity did. All right? It became a political identity. Okay? All right? Tied to disposition. It means dead in law, enslavable. It means African. It means slave. It means exclusion. Why do you think the word be black? To exclude. Why should we treat the label as a reliable origin story? That's my question. And TikTok, this is only for educational purposes. All right? Only. If black becomes a political identity tied to disposition, it means to be unalive in law, enslavable, African, a slave, and exclusion, meaning that what the white status is entitled to, you are excluded from that. Not because your skin is black, but because your status is black. So when the police stop our people, it's not because their skin is black. The first thing they say, well, yeah, you know, if it was a white man. Stop the foolishness, man. There's no such thing as a white man. There are white persons and there are white persons and there are white, and black persons. There's no such thing as white people or black people. There are white persons and there are black persons because they were both creatures of created by the United States. Okay? So why should you treat the label as a reliable origin story? Why would you do that? Go look at Saliviter Matus. Saliviter Matus. It means dead in law. And go look at the etymology of the word black. It means pale. And see where the word came from. It came from swat. And swat came from sordid, which means dirty, filthy, shabby. That's what it means. So the first black people were not us. The first black people were the pale-skinned people in Europe. That's a fact. Okay? That's a fact. Let's proceed. Number 5, section 5. Negro de terra. A lot of people are missing that. Maybe they just don't know about it, but I've been talking about it. Negro de terra. A strong, reasonable doubt anchor. Because you see, you have to use those facts to debunk the lies. Negro de terra is a central anchor because it challenges the simple story that every individual labeled Negro was automatically a foreign import. Because you see, we have proof of this. So therefore we know they lied. You dig? We know they lied. And isn't that amazing? We just had 33 people. All of a sudden now we got 15 people. That's interesting. I guarantee you, if I was on here cursing Africans, cursing my brothers and sisters in the United States, cursing out Caribbean people, cursing out natives, I promise you, I would have had 100 people on here or more. That's the interesting thing about TikTok and these platforms. Anytime you start speaking certain things, they're going to make sure that they shadow ban you because they want you to remain a slave. Don't you realize TikTok has become the new employer? Don't you realize that? While they sit down in their corporate offices and watch how much money come in. When are our people going to wake up, man? When are our people going to wake up? Every live that I do, I mean, I've done a live for literally 6 hours straight, and the most TikTok paid me was $2.47. You think I do that for the money? You think I give a damn about that money? No, that's not why I do it. I do it because I'm looking at the bigger picture, the collective. When are we going to have our own TikTok so we could be the ones in the corporate office watching people do all what they do on the internet and we get a paycheck from it? You feel me? Oh, I know people are waking up. So I'm not mad at them. I'm not even mad at anybody. I'm just a little bit more disappointed in those of us who actually call ourselves woke, but we're still not coming together. But it's going to happen when the time is right. So I'm not even stressing that. So I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing. That's all I can focus on because I don't control anybody. So I can only focus on what I have control over, which is my own self. You feel me? All right, let's proceed. So let's read that again. Section 5. Negro de terra, a strong reasonable doubt, anchor. Negro de terra is a strong anchor because it challenges the simple story that every individual labeled Negro was automatically a foreign import. The phrase is used in Portuguese context and is commonly translated as Negro of the land, which means blacks of the land, because that's what Negro means. If colonial records include a category that describes people labeled Negro as being of the land, then the category are not clean and the origin story is not automatically proven by the label. Reasonable doubt. Question to teach with Negro de terra. All right, let's go. If some people were labeled Negro and described of the land, what did the label actually mean in that context? Was Negro functioning as a status category, meaning labor, taxation, and rights, rather than a geographic location or origin? If labels were inconsistent, why are we taught a single rigid origin story today? Why is that? Let us proceed. Section 6. The African attachment from label to origin story. Let's read that number 6 again. The African attachment from label to origin story. A key part of this lesson is separating the enslavement from Africa as an assumed origin. People can be enslaved in their own land. Enslavement does not prove a people came from somewhere else. African became attached to black as a way of externalizing population's origin and weakening the land-based identity. In other words, weakening our roots, our ancestral roots. That's why they had to give us the movie Roots. Why wasn't it called something else? Why did it have to go to the core, the foundation, the base of that tree? Hence, they tell you about your family tree. So therefore, if they uprooted your roots, where do you think your tree is going to be? Think about what I just said. Why didn't they call the movie something else? Why wasn't it called Alex Haley's documentary? If that movie was particularly about one individual man, why wasn't it called, Otumbo Journey to America? Why was it called Roots? It was made a general. So once again, you see, it was a public notice. You feel me? It was propaganda. And they allow you based on their propaganda to assume what that roots meant. So you drew your own conclusions and took it to mean your story. And what most people don't realize is that in the movie Roots, Kunta Kinte, those two words are two Choctaw words that means whistling beaver. Guaranteed facts. Go look it up. Don't believe anything that I say, because in the word believe is the word lie. You could go online and you could Google Choctaw dictionary PDF and pull it up. Go look at Kunta and then go look at Kente. It means whistling beaver. So the whole moral of the story, which was a subliminal message, what they did was they started the roots in Africa to plant in your mind. All right. In other words, they started the movies from the end of the movie. They put the end of the movie in the beginning of the movie. Well, Chief, what do you mean by that? They took the end of the movie, because if it started the way it was supposed to start, then you would get the true story. So let me tell you the narrative of the true story first, and then tell you what I mean that they took the end of the movie and put it in the beginning of the movie. All right? Here's common sense, wisdom, conductive reasoning. So therefore, if it is a fact, which it is, that Kunta Kinte Those are two Choctaw words that mean whistling beaver. They are literally telling you on the screen, we took a Choctaw man and we beat him to the point where he became Toby, an African. That's what they did. And that went over people's heads because people didn't know. So when I told people that early up in whatever, whether it was in 2016, 2017, people, they still thought I was crazy. But I told them about it. So what they did on screen, right in your face, they took a Choctaw man, an indigenous man, an American Indian, the same thing that Governor Henry Pratt said. Let us save the man, but unalive the Indian. You feel me? Walter Plecker, it was all part of paper genocide. That was an on-screen form of genocide by taking a Choctaw man, all right, and make him an African, Toby, right on the screen. So that's why I told you it was a subliminal message, and that was the goal, to make him African. So it was reverse psychology. Let's start in Africa first. We're going to plant the seeds. So we're going to, instead of giving them the end of the movie, where it's supposed to be, we're showing the Choctaw man being beaten, and I'm saying man, all right? Because it's a West Indian thing right now. I'm not saying man, I'm saying man, all right? So they took the Choctaw man, you did, and they beat the Indian out of him and made him Africa, right on stage, right on the screen. So they put it in your head. This is what we're going to do. Let us start off in Africa, somewhere in Africa, to give them that story. Make sure that narrative is actually what we want it to be. So you see the trick? It's poetry. And that's what happened in Roots. All right? Let's proceed. So once again, that is the African attachment from the label literally telling you African means your point of origin. African became the attachment to black. That's why when you go look at the census, it tells you in their codes and in their own laws, anytime you call yourself black, you literally belong to a racial group, not an original people, not an original landmass, but just a racial group in Africa. That's what you call yourself when you identify as being black. This has nothing to do with your emotions. This has nothing to do with the way you feel. I don't give a damn about your emotions. I'm telling you what the U.S. government have in law. All right? All right, cool. Let us proceed. So therefore, the Negro label, when they came into the Americas, Negro de Terra became black. That's the political status, because Negro was the label. It was just a label. They seen American Indians, everybody had different tribes. Let's just put them in one group and call them Negros de Terra, Negroes of the land. That was the label. Then what are we going to do? Once they accept the label, now we could transform that into a political status, which is black. And then that political status black, now we could take that to mean assign an origin, which is Africa. And therefore Africa means enslavable, which is a legal social meaning. That's all that happened to our people. And that is the synopsis of paper genocide, people. That's what it means. TikTok, this is only for knowledge and educational purposes. Section 7, documentation, double standard, name for some and numbers for others. Names for some and numbers for others. Another strong reasonable doubt argument is the double standard of documentation. When pale Europeans supposedly migrated through the systems like Ellis Island, people recorded them, their names, their dates, the paperwork, and the entry details. Even when they came as slaves, they were labeled as indentured servants. Think about what I just said. But when brown-skinned people were recorded under the same systems, records often became abstract counts. They became cargo. They became slaves, violations, right? And incomplete list. That's why when we do our genealogy, they'll tell you one or two things. It was destroyed by fire or it was destroyed by a flood. And that happened all over the Americas, not just the United States, because I experienced it as well. I give thanks that my grandmother, when she transitioned, her real age was 125. So she was able to give me information, and in her own words, which I recorded it, her mother was older, her grandmother was older, and nobody ever told her that she came from Africa. Nobody. She never heard no slave trade story. You would think a woman that's 125 would know a little bit about what her mother and her grandmother told her, and nobody ever told her about an African slave story. Let it make sense. Let it make sense. Let us proceed. A system that treats people as persons, records identity, names, family, origin. Let's read that again. A system that treats people as persons or people records identity as names, family, and origin. A system that treats people as property records inventory as counts, value, and loss. Thank you for that. Gratitude for the hearts. Let's read the distinction once again. When people are not property, okay, the white status is not treated as property. So therefore, the system treats them and records their identity as name, family, and origin. The black status, they are treated as property. The system records them as counts, numbers, okay, as numbers, value, and loss. Here's a fact. Ellis Island Ellis Island processed millions of immigrants. The U.S. Federal Immigration Station at Ellis Island was open from 1892 until 1954. But check this out. This is what they did in reverse as well. It happened earlier than that. It happened earlier than that. And I'll break that down in a minute. During this period, at least 12 million, it could have been more, but that's well documented. More than 12 million immigrants, we're going to call them immigrants because that's what they want to call them, passed through Ellis Island on their way into the United States. That's well documented. This number is supported by multiple historical sources: the U.S. National Park Services, the Census Bureau, historical records. Ellis Island was not the only port of entry during this era. Some passengers entered through other ports or bypassed Ellis Island entirely. Example, the first and the second class passengers sometimes disembarked on other piers without passing through the station or the checkpoint or the port. Let's not talk about the Angels port in California, where they had all them Asians coming in. You could go to Family Search and find that to be true. Go to the official historical and government sources, such as the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island Foundation, the overview and history. It gives the background on Ellis Island and mentions peak usage and immigration totals. The Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island link. Once again, the Library of Congress, Ellis Island Materials, highlights over 12 million immigrants passed through the station. The Library of Congress, I gave the link for that as well. The U.S. Census Bureau, historical blog, notes that from 1892 to 1954, over 12 million immigrants were processed. I gave the link for that. Reasonable doubt question. Why are we expected to accept one set of records as precise as structured, while another is allowed to be incomplete and dehumanized, yet still treated as unquestionable truth? Where are these well-documented structured records for the so-called black people in the Americas? Where is it? Hold up. So here we go, man. I tell you, man, it's always something with all of a sudden my Ah, man, hold on for a second. You see, the enemy always got something going on, man. Always got something going on. My laptop is practically new, all right? And then all of a sudden, one of the buttons, I just tapped it and it popped off. I keep telling y'all, man, you can't make this up. You can't make it up, man. You can't make it up. I promise you, you can't make this up. You can't. You can't make it up. All right? You can't make this up. You can't. So now, this is not working. Ancestors, give me grace, man. I tell you, the things I have to go through for my people and with my people, man, it's not even funny. It's not. Okay? But anyway, I'll try to fix that later. You see, that's the little thing for the up and down joint. It just popped off all of a sudden. All right? But anyway, let's proceed. The word American, identity replacement by language. Definition of American. So what I was asking earlier about there are full records that talks about who these people were. Every record, the 12.5 or more million that came through Ellis Island, that don't even count those that came through, like I said, the Port Angels in California. Okay? But yet still, is it a coincidence or is it a system hiding something? Why is that everyone could trace their lineage all the way back to Africa, Asia, and Europe, but the original people that they're telling they're from Africa, all of a sudden, we just can't find no records to prove and show that we've been here according to their standards. The records are always burnt or flooded. Why is that? And like I said before, Ellis Island didn't happen, in the late 1800s. They lied about that. That's a lie. You feel me? That's a lie because they had to create the African slave story. Because they don't want you. That was a 12.5 million Slavs that came here. You dig? So they have to change the narrative of the story. That's why they had to bring what's called the Gregorian calendar into the United States. Because due to the Gregorian calendar, we lost a few thousand years. At least 12 to 1500 for the least. You dig? But they will not tell you that. And I've proven that before. People don't even know how old they truly are. And for the purpose of this lesson, I'm going to mention it again. If you were born in 9 months, if you're a full-time pregnancy, a woman carries a baby full-term pregnancy 9 months. If you were born in 9 months, why are you celebrating your birthday every 12 months? That means every 12 months you are robbed 3 months. So every 9 months every 12 months, you are actually 3 months older than what you are. So think about what I'm saying. You feel me? So when they instituted the Gregorian calendar, it was literally a spell. You did. A whole new mental paradigm shift that confused our people because our people wasn't used to that type of energy, of time keeping. It was a spell. So therefore, you don't know how old you are. You don't. And if you were an 8-month pregnancy, you're older than somebody who was born in 9 months because you were born before them. If you're a preemie, whether it's 6 or 7 months, you're older than somebody that was a full-term pregnancy because you were born before them. So if you were born in 6 months, guess what? Every 6 months is your birthday. So what happened to the rest of the months? Where did it go? So you see the game that was played? And I'm going to give you the solution to find your true age. And then we're going to continue. To find out your true age based on the Gregorian calendar, what you do is you take your current age and you multiply it by 12, which is the illusion. And then if it was 9 months, you divide it by 9. If it was 8, you divide it by 8. If it was 7, you divide it by 7. That's how you know your age. You take your current age, multiply it by 12, and divide it by 9 if you were 9 months. If you were 8 months by 8, etc. And that's how old you are. So we are actually older than we think we are. So with that being said, your true retirement age should be about 49. Because when you're about 49, you are actually about 65. And that's facts. And I'll leave that right here. Let's proceed. All right, let's continue. Definition of American referred to the original native of the land, including descriptions such as copper-toned. Over time, American shifted to mean pale-skinned Europeans born in America. This is an example of replacing the identity of the land through language. Teach the inversion. The newcomers adapt the land's identity as the default's American, while the original people are pushed into the side label of colored and black, which weakens their claim to be the default inhabitants, which was American. All right? Reasonable doubt question. If the label American can be redesigned. Reasonable doubt question. If the label American can be redesigned, what else can be redesigned through the schooling and law system? You tell me. Section 9. Reverse psychology. Make the old new and make the new old. This section in the summary of the method, colonial ideology can invert perception in two directions at once. Make the land new by renaming it. Make the original people new outsiders by attaching foreign origins or status labels. Make the newcomers old, aka natives, by giving them the identity of the land, for example, becoming Americans. Hence you have Native Americans. They are not the old world people. They are newcomers that was put in place in the 1700s during this whole, what I call the whole time, the time, how would I put it? The time loop, so to speak, by the Gregorian calendar. Okay? And repeat the story long enough that it feels like common sense on both sides, because Native Americans, some of them truly think they are the original people, and some of them actually know they are not. Okay? The old become the new, and the new becomes the old. Once that inversion is normalized, the people most harmed by it are also trained to defend it. Isn't that what you see happening right now? The people who are harmed by this the most are the ones who are trained to defend it. Somebody tell me I'm telling a lie. My closing statement on this part of the lesson. If a story is true, it could survive any question. If a story requires one group to accept shifting names, unequal documentation, and imposed origins, then reasonable doubt is justified. Colonial systems did not only conquer the land, they conquered the meaning of what an American is. Our job is to use discernment, logic, and consistent standards to test what we were taught. Free your mind, my people. You were colonized, not imported. All right? That is the first part of the lesson. Let me drink some of my cilantro water. Give me a second, please. Keep tapping that screen. We're about 33,000 likes so far. Keep tapping that screen. Let's get to about 40,000. We got some more reading to do. All right, let's go to the next. Here we go. So what we're going to do at this time, we're going to go into the origin and historical use of the name Africa. All right, this is what we're going to do. We are going to go, and then after that, we're going to look into the etymology of the word Africa just once again to show you that what I'm teaching here is actually coherent with the etymology of the word or the term Africa. Origin and historical use of the name Africa. The lesson objective. This lesson examines the historical origin of the name Africa identify when and where the term was first used, and explain how it expanded from original name to a continental designation. All right? The lesson relies on classical resources, Roman administrative records, and historical linguistics. And like I tell people, I do my due diligence. I don't just come pop off. No. When you see me coming on here bringing information, you better know that the chief did his due diligence. All right? So that's what we're going to dive into right now. Hold on for a second. All right. Man, I just... Whoa. Damn, did I go down that far? This is crazy. Oh, wow. Here we go. The earliest documented use of Africa. The name Africa first appears as a formal geographic designation in Roman records following the Roman defeat of the Carthage in 146 BCE. Okay? It did not come from a poem. Just so you know. I don't think it did, but if I'm wrong, we'll see. Because like I said, I went into some real deep research to find that out. So maybe you're correct. Let's see if you are. All right? So therefore, the name Africa first appeared as a formal geographic designation in Roman records following the Roman defeat of Carthage in 146 BCE. After the Third Punic War, Rome created a province called Africa Proconsularis. Africa Proconsularis. This province corresponded primarily to the modern-day Tunisia, with limited extension into coastal regions of present-day Libya and Algeria. At that time, Africa referred only to this specific Roman-controlled territory and not to the entire continent. Let's read that again, because I don't want that to go over anybody's heads. The earliest documented use of the word Africa, the name Africa, first appears as a formal geographic designation in the Roman records following the Roman defeat of Carthage in 146 BCE. After the Third Punic War, Rome created a province called Africa Proconsularis. This province corresponded primarily to the modern-day Tunisia, with limited extension into coastal regions of present-day Libya and Algeria. At this time, Africa referred only to this specific Roman-controlled territory and not to the entire continent. Well, let's pause here for a second. Well, Chief, can you prove that with the etymology? Let's see. Let's go into the etymology of the word Africa now. Here we are. The etymology of the word Africa. Okay, what does it say? Latin, Africa, terra, African land. Libya, Carthaginian, so territory. So as you could see, the research I've done, it corresponds with, so far, with the etymology of Africa. Let's continue reading. The province of Africa. Africa as a continent, feminine of adjective Africanus from Afar, an African, a word of uncertain origin, right? The Latin word originally was used only in reference to the region around modern-day Tunisia. It gradually was extended to the whole continent. So once again, as you could see, the research is corresponding with the etymology of what we just confirmed, that Africa was only coined to Tunisia and its immediate surrounding territory, particularly Algeria and Libya. You see, that's how you teach and that's how you do your due diligence. So even if people come with their emotions, I don't care about emotions. Documentation beats conversation. That's why I don't debate. And I don't bring people on here to debate and fight. I don't do none of that. I'm just here to give you the information. You do what you want with it. Let's get back to the lesson now. So now that the etymology corresponds to what I've given you thus far, okay? Let us rock. The classical definitions and limitations. Classical definitions and limitations. In Greek and Roman sources from the 1st century BCE and CE, Africa is consistently described as a regional land west of Egypt. Classical writers such as Pliny and the Elder, Strabo, and Ptolemy use the term narrowly, okay? Other regions of the continent were identified separately using names such as Libya, Ethiopia, or left unnamed. That's a fact. There is no evidence in classical literature that Africa originally referred to the entire continental landmass. All right? That doesn't exist because it never happened. Linguistic origin of the word. The Latin term Africa derives from the word Afar or Afri, referring to the people living in the region of modern-day Tunisia. So those are the real and only Africans. Why do you think when the United States gave you a designation of being black because you want to call yourself black, they told you you belong to a racial group somewhere in Africa, not tied to a particular land or original people? Do you think it's a coincidence? No, because they know that only Tunisia had the only real Africans. Man, the job that they did on my people, and a lot of you want to fight me because I don't want to call myself black. Okay, do you? But the United States know exactly what they're doing though. Let us read. Reading is fun for the mental. The Latin term Africa derives from the word Afar or Afri, referring to the people living in that region of modern-day Tunisia, the only real Africans. The adjective Africanos meant of Africa or African. Linguistic authorities note that the word origin is uncertain. We just read that in the etymology. Though some scholars suggest possible connections to the Phoenician or the Semitic terms related to the land or the dust. The Latin usage remained regional for centuries. So therefore, for centuries, the only place that was known on that landmass as Africa was Tunisia, because that was where the Afri or the Afri people were, the first people that were coined Africans. Okay? Let's go to medieval. Medieval continuity. During the medieval period, European scholars continued to use Africa primarily, once again, to describe North Africa. North Africa. Isn't that interesting that the Moors came from North Africa? Isn't that interesting that the Moors are, some of them are the real Africans? In the Tunisia region, Algeria. But that might go over some heads. Let's read some more. Maps and texts from this era often divided the known world into Europe, Asia, and Africa. But the boundaries of Africa were vague and incomplete. Large portions of the continental remained categorized under other names or labeled as unknown territories. And that was in the medieval onwards. Okay, let's go into expansion to a continental name. Between the 15th and the 16th century, when was that? Between the 15th and the 16th century. Isn't that when they told us they were bringing slaves from Africa? So could that have been the Moors that came from when they lost their power by Isabella and Ferdinand? Those were the only Africans that came, and they were the Afro people from Tunisia Hmm. Like I said, read with understanding. Don't let me lose you now. Don't let me lose you. I'm giving you documentation. It beats conversation. You feel me? Between the 15th and the 16th century, Europeans' exploration and cartography, expanded dramatically. During this period, map makers increasingly applied the name Africa to the entire continental landmass. You know why? Because they had to come up with a plan. Because America was already a Negro land, they had to give you the idea that everybody came from that landmass called Akabulan. It wasn't even called that because they had different names. The point I'm making is this. The only place that was called Africa all the way up until the 1500s and the 1600s was Tunisia. It was only when they started bringing, once again, some of the Moors that went back to North Africa and brought them here, they started telling you everybody came from the whole landmass named Africa. Okay. Well, y'all might think I'm crazy, huh? Well, let us read. Let's read. So the map makers increasingly applied the name Africa to the entire continental landmass. This expansion coincided with the European maritime dominance, colonial administration, and the transatlantic slave trade. I wonder what trade they're talking about. Because I guarantee you, ain't no millions of Africans came into the Americas. That's a damn lie. All right? That's a lie. By the 17th century, Africa was widely accepted in European maps and texts as the name of the continent because it was part of the paper genocide. Because they had to give all the people that was in the Americas, the Negroes, the Negro land, they had to make sure they create a story that took them out of their roots and put them in Africa. So they named the whole damn continent Africa just so it could affect the new so-called people and the new so-called world to give them a new story. Let us proceed. Key historical conclusion. The term Africa was not originally a continental name. It began as a Roman provincial designation centered on Tunisia in 146 BCE. For over a millennium, its usage remained regional. The application of Africa to the entire continent or continental region is a relatively recent historical development associated with early modern European expansion. For over 1,000 years, Africa remained only to parts of North Africa. Those were the people that they sent from Europe after Isabella and Ferdinand took over Spain and Portugal. They had a few choices. Go back to Africa, remain the subjects of Isabella and Ferdinand, or come to the Americas to work as servants that later became enslaved. These people did not come from Africa. You dig? I'm talking about directly. You feel me? They may have been from there originally, but they were in Europe already. And this is the truth and nothing but the truth. The extension of Africa to the entire continent occurred, like I said, in the 15th and the 17th century during the European exploration and colonization. All right? Let us go to the next lesson. And I'm going to give y'all more facts and proof in law. And before I proceed, I'm not sure. I can't remember the sister's name. I apologize. I should have written it down, but I want to give her some credit. She was the one who mentioned that law. I was actually, I think it might have been on Facebook or TikTok. I ran across a video, and it was real short. But she mentioned the law all right, that broke down, something about mestizos and Indians, and it was something in law to show that the United States was literally, condoning and participating in slavery. So I did my own due diligence, and even if it was just a short clip that she mentioned it, I wanted to go more in detail, and that's what I'm doing. So whomever that sister is, I give her credit for that, for at least saying it and making me aware of that, and because I knew exactly what happened, but I couldn't just find that one part in their law. Of course, we saw it in paper genocide, but there's an actual law. So whomever you are, sis, I thank you for that. Just wanted to make sure I give you some credit just in case you happen to run across this video. I like to just give respect. You feel me? All right, cool. Let's proceed. So this is an actual law. It's an act to prohibit the importation of slaves from Africa or other places beyond the sea. Well, hold up. That's what the law is saying. That's an actual act. That's an actual law. And we're going to get to that law in a second, okay? An act to prohibit the importation of slaves from Africa. Are we talking about Tunisia or are we talking about the continent? You see what I'm saying? Because you see, when you don't read with understanding and you don't do your due diligence, you haven't studied to show yourself approved. At that point, you're only thinking Africa, the entire continent. But now we are breaking down the word Africa. We are seeing that the only place that was called Africa is Tunisia. Coincidentally, it's in North Africa. Coincidentally, it was the North African Moors that ruled Europe for about 700, from 711 to 1492. And then they lost their reign, and all of a sudden, in the 1500s, the whole continent of Africa is being called Africa. Somebody let it make sense. Or am I the only one who like to think with the mind that the universe gave me? But let us read with understanding. An act to prohibit the importation of slaves from Africa or other places beyond the sea. In this state, for 2 years, they're talking about the United States. So the deal is, the act is saying, it's actually a law. The law is saying, we're going to make sure we prohibit the importation of the African, the Tunisians, and that surrounding regions, okay? Or other places beyond the sea. Who knows what that is? Because we have Europe, we have Asia, and we have Africa. So we don't know what that is, right? Into the United States for 2 years. So they put a ban on that. And also, what does it say? And is a conjunction. If I have a Honda and a Toyota, I have two cars. It doesn't mean one car. It doesn't mean the same car. If I have an apple and an orange, I have two fruits. It doesn't mean one fruit. So therefore, when you use "and," it's always an addition. So pay attention. And also to prohibit the importation or bringing of whom? The Negro slaves. Well, hold up. Because in the act, and that's a law. I'm gonna show you the law now. It says Africans and other places beyond the sea. That's prohibited. But it also says the importation of bringing in Negro slaves, mulattoes and Indians, Moors and mestizos bound for a term of years from any of the United States by land or water. What you mean by land or water? So who are these Negro slaves? Who are these mulattoes? Who are these Indians? Who are these Moors? Who are these mestizos? By land or water? That's interesting. Let's read. Let's read some more. And here is the transcription of that whole law. Okay? That was in 1792. 1792. The 12th of December. Pardon me. The 21st of December in 1792. And that's in South Carolina. Let us read. It says, whereas it is deemed inexpedient to increase the number of slaves within this state in our present circumstances and situation. All right? Yes, that's in 1972, and that's the 21st of December. All right? And this is the transcript that we are reading. It's an actual, law. Whereas it is deemed inexpedient to increase the number of slaves within this state in our present circumstances and situation. Be it therefore enacted by the Honorable the Senate and the House of Representatives, now meet and sitting in the General Assembly, and by the authority of the same, that no slave shall be imported into this state from Africa, the West India Islands. So, well, you're trying to tell me they were already importing slaves from the West Indies? That's interesting. But let us read, because that's in law. Okay, the West India Islands or other place beyond the seas. They didn't call the West India Islands place beyond the seas because you know why? That's in America. It's in North America. So that's on the land. So therefore, other place beyond the sea for and during the term of 2 years, they're going to stop. Say, you know what? Let's stop. Let's stop doing that. Commencing from the first day of January next, which will be in the year of our Lord, 1793. Okay? Which is the following year. Let us read. Reading is fundamental. I love to read. What does it say? And be it further enacted by the authority aforesaid, that no slave or Negro, Indian, Moor, mulatto, or mestizo bound to service for a term of years shall be brought into this state by land or by water from any of the United States. All right? From any of the United States. They was talking about Carolina, right? So Carolina is saying, man, listen, we don't want no, what you call it? Hold on for a second. We don't want no Negroes. We don't want no Indians. We don't want no Moors. We don't want no mulatto. We don't want no mestizos anywhere from the West Indian Islands or from Africa, the African people, or from anywhere else in the United States. We don't want that in South Carolina. Okay? So they're saying, or any of the countries bordering therein. All right? Ever thereafter. Provided, nevertheless, that it shall and may be lawful for any citizen of the United States coming to settle with his family in the state from any of the United States and to actually settling in this state for 5 years to bring along with him or her all such slaves as he, she, or may possess in his, her, or their own right, or as a guardian for any person removing him of them. But no person shall be permitted on the color of such removal to bring with him, her, or them into the state for sale. All right. So they're saying that if you already owned these people, if you're coming into this state, we will honor what you have, but we are not going to allow you to sell them. Okay? Layman terms. The slave or the slaves of any other person, and provided also that if any citizen of the state shall intermarry with a citizen of another state, it shall and may be lawful for such citizen to bring into the state all such slave as he or they may actually and directly acquire by such intermarriage. So they're also saying that if you marry somebody outside of that particular state and you have slaves, then therefore you could actually bring those slaves into that state. All right? Let us proceed. Let me see. Boom, 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 boom. And provided nothing in this act contained shall be construed to extend to the servants or domestics of persons traveling to and from and into this state from any of the United States, or to the domestics of persons coming from any other place, and residing not more than 6 months in this state. But such servants or domestics shall, in such case, be permitted to be sold or to remain in the state at the departure of their owner or masters. And be it further enacted by the authority aforesaid, that if any slave or Negro, that's in law, people. That's in law. Any slave or what? Or Negro. So what are they saying in law? Well, Chief, guess what they're saying, Chief? That the Negro wasn't the slave. So if the Negro wasn't the slave, who was the Negro? The Negro was the indigenous man or woman. Okay? The Negro was the indigenous man or woman. The American Indian. The one that was renamed Negro. You feel me? All right, cool. Let's read. Reading is fun for the mental. So once again, that if any slave or Negro, Indian, Moor, mulatto, or mestizo, bound to service for a term of years, shall be imported or brought into the state, contrary to the true intent and meaning of this act. Such slave or slave, it says, or slave Negro. So they had some Negroes that were slaves. Indian, Moor, mulatto, or Indian slave, mestizo, shall be deemed and taken to a forfeiture to the state, 1/3 part of whose value shall be paid to the person or persons making information of such importation or bringing in, and the person or persons importing or bringing in such slave or slaves, the Negro or the Indian or the Moor, mulatto or mestizo, contrary to the intent and meaning of this act. All right. So obviously there were Negroes who were not slaves. There were Moors who were not slaves. There were Indians who were not slaves. There were mulattoes who were not slaves. And there were mestizos who were not slaves. All right. Shall moreover be subject to a penalty of 50 pounds for every slave or Negro or Indian or Moor or mulatto or mestizo so brought in. So as you could see, they're constantly, all right, separating slave from Negro, from Indian to Moor to mulatto to mestizo. However, sometimes every category could have been enslaved as well. I just want to point that out. All right. And be it further enacted by the authority aforesaid, that where any person has knowledge of is sufficient grounds to believe that any slave or Negro, Indian, Moor, mulatto, or mestizo has been imported or brought into this state, contrary to the true intent and meaning of this act, it shall and may be lawful for such person to make information thereof to a magistrate upon oath, who is hereby required and directed to issue this warrant against the person accused of such importation or bringing in, and who upon hearing the information and the person accused may either discharge the accused if he thinks there is no just cause of information or good grounds of suspicion, or if there appears sufficient cause of information, he shall forthwith take into safekeeping all the slaves, the Negroes, the Indians, the Moors, the mulattoes, or the mestizos so imported or brought into this state contrary to this act, unless the party accused give ample security for redelivery of the same slave or the slaves or the Indian or the Moor or the Negro or the mulatto or the mestizo. All right. If adjudged to be forfeited And the said magistrate shall forthwith proceed summon to his aid one other magistrate and three freeholders, who shall hear the parties and adjudge thereon as the law and justice doeth belong. And either if the informer or the person accused are dissatisfied with the judgment of the single magistrate or the magistrates and freeholders, they shall be allowed an appeal from such judgment to the next court of common pleas to be holden for the district where such trial has been made had, where he said appeal shall be tried before a jury of the country, without delay, the judgment of which court shall be final. So they're literally just kind of, reiterating the terms and conditions of bringing in these people into the state. All right. Just saying that you're not allowed to sell them, but if you get married, you could bring them in, and they have all these different conditions. But like I said, that's an actual court case. All right. In the Senate House, the 21st day of December, in the year of our Lord 1792, at the 7th year of the independence of the United States of America. All right. David Ramsey, President of the Senate. Jacob Reed, Speaker of the House of Representatives. And this is the citation right here. An act to prohibit the importation of slaves from Africa or other places beyond the sea into the state for 2 years, and also to prohibit the importation or, bringing in of the Negro slaves, the mulattoes, the Indians, the Moors, or mestizos beyond for a term of 2 years. Laws of enslavement and freedom in the Anglo-Atlantic world, assessed December 27, 2025. And there's a link for a website. And I also provide the source, the acts and resolutions of the General Assembly of the state of South Carolina, passed in December of 1792. Charlestown, South Carolina, MDDC, blah, 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 1793, pages 11 to 13. All right, so why am I reading all of this? I'm reading all of this once again to show you, my people, the extent of the lie that was told in regards to so-called black people in the Americas. All right, the whole conspiracy of saying that we all came from Africa, that's a lie, a huge lie. Like I said before, the majority of the people were already in the Americas. And based on what we have read thus far, the only time they literally named the entire continent of Africa is in the 1500s to the 1700s. Before that, Africa wasn't called, the landmass now called Africa wasn't called that. The only place that was called Africa was Tunisia. Coincidentally, that's in North America. Coincidentally, that's where a lot of the Moors are from. Coincidentally, it was in 1492 that they lost power in Spain. Coincidentally, some of them had to be sent back to North Africa. Coincidentally, some of them agreed to come into the United States. Do you think that all that is a coincidence? As servants, some of them as helpers, and became enslaved. So could that be just the Africans who came here? Let it make sense. Anyway, let's read the last document that I prepared. Here we go. Colonial racial classifications, origin and the Spanish caste system. Colonial racial classification, origin and the Spanish caste system. Lesson overview. This lesson explains how early colonial and U.S. laws distinguished Africa as a geographic source while separately classifying people as Negro, Indian, Moor, mulatto, and mestizo. That's what we just read. These terms were legal and social identities created in the Americas, not simple indicators of African origin. All right? I have to keep reiterating. This is not about hating Africans. This is about, once again, debunking and disproving the whole narrative of this African slave trade. It never happened. And I know some people may say, hey, Chief, you're crazy, man. No, I'm telling you, it's a lie. Because you have to think of the people who gave you the story. Why would they tell you the truth? After they have taken our identity, why would they tell us the truth? What does it benefit them when every colonizer who came in all these books said that the people were brown-skinned people? They were called Negros de Terra, the blacks of the land. So somebody let me, something is not connecting. It's either they were there or they weren't. But apparently, it's not just one source. Practically every colonizer that came said that these people were brown-skinned people and they were Negroes. All right then. Let us proceed. All right. This lesson explains how early colonial and U.S. laws distinguish Africa as a geographic source while separately classifying people as Negro, Indian, Moor, Mulatto, and Mestizo. These terms were legal and social identities created in the Americas, not simple indicators of African origin. The lesson traces how these classifications emerged in the Caribbean and Spanish colonies, became formalized in the Spanish caste system and later appeared in the U.S. Census and courts. Like I said before, the Caribbean was the testing ground. Key concept: place versus legal identity. Please listen to what I'm saying. Place versus legal identity. Early laws often prohibited the importation of slaves from Africa a place, while regulating or taxing Negroes, Indians, Moors, Mulattoes, and Mestizos, the legal categories. This separation shows that these identities were not defined by Africa, but by colonial control within the Americas. Negro de Terra. In early Spanish and Caribbean records, Negro did not automatically mean African born. The phrase Negro de Terra, Negroes of the land, was used to describe indigenous people already present in the Caribbean and the surrounding regions. Negro functioned as a status, a label applied to dark-skinned people, subjugated population, including indigenous Americans and mixed populations. Over time, the term expanded to include African-born people, but its earliest colonial use was broader and location-based. Indian referred to indigenous people of the Americas, including Central, South America indigenous people, North America indigenous people. Note, one America, many tribes. Indians were legally trafficked, enslaved, and taxed under colonial law, despite later narratives claiming otherwise. Moor was a religious and a status based on term not strictly African. It referred to Muslim or non-Christian population from the Mediterranean world and the Americas. All right. In Iberian law, Moor often described legal condition and faith, not continent. Mulatto described a person of mixed ancestry. This category arose in the Americas and could include a mix of African and European, a mix of indigenous and European, or a mix of indigenous and African ancestry. Mulatto identity could not exist without colonial mixing. It is a new world category. Mestizo, described as indigenous and European ancestry, regardless of skin color. This term originated in Spanish America. Mestizo became indigenous to the Americas by definition. The Spanish colonial caste system. Spain formalized racial and social control through the casta system. This system categorized people based on ancestry, skin tone, and perceived purity of blood. Major categories include Indio, Negro, Mestizo, Mulatto, Sambo, Spanish, Peninsula, and Criollo. These categories determine taxation, labor obligations, legal rights, and social mobility. The Caribbean as the original point or the point of origin. The caste system developed first in the Caribbean. The Caribbean served as the testing ground for racial reclassification or classification and the labor control. From there, the system spread to Central America, South America, Spanish-controlled territories, indigenous lands already under colonial rule. Transition into the United States and censuses. After the U.S. independence, colonial categories did not disappear. They were absorbed into federal statutes, customs and taxation laws, the U.S. censuses, the court decisions. Early U.S. law continued using racial categories without clear geographic meaning, reinforcing legal identity over ancestry. Key takeaway: Africa was treated as a place. Negro, Indian, Moor, Mulatto, and Mestizo were colonial legal identities created in the Americas. Okay? In terms of the people that were brought into the Americas. You feel me? Let me just make sure I make that clear, because Moors were using Moors in Europe. But I'm talking about when they came into the Americas, they were also calling the people Moor, because from that perspective, it also meant a dark-skinned person. All right? These categories were tools of control, not accurate description of origin. Understanding this distinction exposes how race was constructed for legal and economic purposes. This is the end of the lesson. So like I said before, I only came here to give the lesson. I'm not going to extend the conversation, too long, because I don't want to keep babbling. I just want to strictly stick to this lesson. So in summary, we see that the colonial system came for one purpose: to make everything in the old new. How do you do that? First, you start renaming things. You start reclassifying people and create a system of educating. And if you teach something long enough, it becomes the reality of those being taught. But yet still, we are given that a certain demographic of people, they could trace their ancestry or their lineage all the way back to Europe, Africa, and Asia without any unbroken chain past 1492. But for whatever reason, there's another demographic of individuals for what they just stop at the 1800s or the 1700s. Yet still, it is well documented that when these colonizers came into the Americas, the people were called Negroes of the land, the blacks of the land. Where did these people go? They just disappeared? Where did they go? Well, the truth of the matter is, we never left. We have always been here, and we'll continue to be here. So with that being said, I want to thank y'all for being a part of the build. I'm going to make sure, as long as I know this thing is actually available on TikTok, I'm going to download it. And at some point, I'm going to post it on my YouTube. When I do, I'll let everybody know. All right. But thank you once again for being a part of the build. Like I told y'all before, the Republic stands, our Republic stands. And we're going to continue to push the true story, the narrative of what the story truly is, and not what his story told us. You dig? We are not new people. We are the old people. All right. We are the fathers and mothers, the grandparents, and everybody's coming here to disrespect. You dig? So even the word said, honor your mother and father so that your days will be longer. So a lot of these people are going to be short-lived, and they know that their time is up. All right. So we have to know that we cannot keep fighting these individual battles. We have to focus on the collective. And that's what I was sent to do. Restore the collective. And I'll continue to do that. Regardless of the obstacles and regardless of the challenges, it doesn't matter. I don't focus on that. I focus strictly. I am laser sharp focused that I was sent here to restore. And I'm going to continue to do that. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your continuation. And I doubt, I not doubt, I'm not going to be doing another live tonight. I'm going to chill. I'm going to relax myself, do some meditation, probably, look at some, funny, funny videos, and just to laugh. And because when I do this, these lives, they take a lot of energy. So just to kind of laugh, calm myself down, rejuvenate a little bit. And I'm going to enjoy the rest of my evening. So thank you. If you're not following, please do, because I always come with all these different, like I said, meaningful lives to actually teach. All right. I know I've gone through a lot of information before, but I'm glad I just want to focus on that so I could actually post them. The next one I'll probably do, I might go into, go back and revisit the Mormons, who they are, so I could just stick strictly on that and record that and make sure that it's actually put on YouTube. You feel me? So people could go check it out in its full entirety, so I don't have to focus on doing recaps on TikTok. All right? So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your continuation. Peace and love to each and every one of you. Thanks.